Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be having new adventures in time and space with a brand new season of Doctor Who. And then we will be defending Tokyo from a kaiju in the action prequel Godzilla Minus One. But before all of that, Nick, do you have something to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, this is probably my main sort of TV viewing project for the last few months, actually, which I finally finished a week or two back. This is my viewing of For All Mankind, the alternate history sci-fi series on Apple TV, created by Ronald D. Moore, Matt Wolpert and Ben Nadevi. Ronald D. Moore, of course, quite well known for his work on Deep Space Nine and the Battlestar Galactica reboot. And yeah, this is another really good sci-fi show. Yeah, the basic premise is, this is alternate history depicting what would happen if the global space race had continued, because the Soviet Union had landed on the moon first, and the other superpowers had redoubled their efforts in a bid to compete with the Russians. And this sort of back and forth pissing match had just continued throughout the decades, and each series takes place about a decade after the previous, so there's a 8 to 10 year time gap between each year. So the first year was, I think, the 60s? Yeah, I've watched up, or was it the 70s? Anyway, yeah, I've watched up to series 4, and at this stage we've just done the 2000s, so I think that would mean the first series is probably the 70s.
Yeah, well, the moon landing was in 1969, so it's probably the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, it probably started in 1969, then moved into the 70s, season 1, I think, yeah.
That's a pretty epic scope for a story. Do they have a sort of different characters for each season as they hand off over time? Or I guess some characters are young in one season and older in another?
There is, yeah, a certain amount of aging makeup, yeah. And yeah, it does mean that the cast sort of rotates around quite a lot. There are, at this point, I think, without spoiling, 2 or 3 original series characters left at this point in season 4. Because, yeah, they have had to bring in a lot of new people, which I think most of the time works quite well. The main thing that's good about this show is, well, partly the incredibly intricate, carefully thought out drama about what would happen and different space advancements and how them doing this causes someone else to do that. It's a very character-driven show, and they're also very good at keeping it grounded on a human level so that the big political moves and sci-fi stuff continues to have an effect on the characters who you recognise. It's very much, For All Mankind always has its eye on the individual people who are kind of ground up by the machine of progress, I suppose. We're going into space, but at what cost? I think as the series go on, particularly, it becomes very focused on the lofty goals of what we might one day achieve, and a lot of people are just sat there going, but a lot of us have died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of space drama and things focus on this idea of the inspirational view of space as something we can reach out and achieve these great things and kind of spread across the stars. I guess it's a way to inspire people to come over the incredible obstacles that are needed to go to space, the huge engineering and physical challenges.
Well, yeah, and it increasingly starts to feel a lot like propaganda. Like there's a couple of the characters who are still left from earlier in the show who are just sort of evangelizing on and on about the space race. It just starts to sound increasingly hollow and sad, and only on season 4. But there's still, it's not just a show about the depressing heartlessness of it all. The advancement is kind of fascinating. The idea of what space technology they're going to hit next, what's the next thing that they're going to need to do, is how they're going to keep pushing on and on and on despite the increasing levels of difficulty and danger involved. Like, very minor spoilers, at this point they've got as far as Mars. As the series have rolled on, they have attempted to push further and further into space. I'm interested to see how far they're actually going to end up going.
So is it finished with season 4, or is it still ongoing?
It's still ongoing. Season 5 has been commissioned. They've actually also commissioned a spin-off called Star City, focusing on the Russian side of this. So this appears to be one of the successful Apple TV shows, which is fortunate, as it looks like it costs a fortune.
Yeah, probably does, yeah. It's expensive science fiction. I'm glad it's carrying on and there's still more to do.
Yeah, I'm genuinely pleasantly surprised at a streaming service at Apple TV's scale, because let's be honest, it does feel like the one that not that many people have is actually managing to keep this show going. Because, yeah, it's a really high-level, premium telly, premium drama-looking production. It really looks great. The aging makeup, as I say, there's a lot of it, does actually look fairly good and convincing for the most part. And yeah, it's a really enjoyable, absorbing show. It's very novelistic, it's very sturdy in its sort of careful plotting. I mean, over the course of 4 seasons, there's only been a couple of storylines which I think haven't quite worked. Season 3 is probably the one that had the most wobbles in it, but for the most part, yeah, this is a really good, solid show.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I think Apple, they've got huge amounts of money. I guess they've got this sort of tech giant money behind them, and I think they're deploying it as much to make their product competitive. I mean, they've got everything from commissioning lavish Martin Scorsese films, expensive sci-fi stuff like this. I suppose it's almost ironic that Their most successful show is probably one of the cheapest to make, Ted Lasso. It's just people in a few rooms, basically, being nice to each other.
That show did also look pretty shiny, to be honest. There were some very expensive-looking football sequences.
Yeah, but they've got. Yeah, I think that's how Apple keep their service competitive. And this is definitely, I feel, one of the jewels in the crown. It's something I've heard recommended to me a few times, especially by you. I've seen like sort of on Twitter and things like that, attention-grabbing hot takes such as the new season of the best sci-fi show around just dropped and things like that. Whenever the next For All Mankind comes out. So yeah, I think after I've finished my deep dive into Ghost in the Shell, this probably should be the next sci-fi show I tackle.
Yeah, I mean, it does have a lot of sci-fi and a lot of political intrigue, so I do feel like it's probably fairly up your alley, and it's also really good. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely my sort of thing. Yeah. No, I'm excited, especially as it's from the creator of Deep Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica, two sci-fi shows that I enjoyed a lot.
I mean, I'm not an expert in Ronald D. Moore's exact background, and plus, obviously, this is from him and two other people, so who knows who wrote what. But it does have the sort of, I don't know, cynical military realism that Battlestar Galactica did well. The sort of what would this actually be like, and how would it be militarized, and what would the harsh reality of it end up being? Yeah, that's what Battlestar Galactica did well during its best moments. And For All Mankind, by taking this sort of attempting to find a plausible feeling alternative history, is, I think, if anything, really doubling down on that. Like, there's no sign of them wandering off in any of the perhaps more fanciful and less successful directions that Battlestar Galactica ended up wandering down. This is very much just the hard military realism side of Battlestar Galactica taken to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, Battlestar Galactica had that side, but it was kind of counterbalanced by their sort of philosophical, religious, spiritual side that they brought to the show. I mean, I know a lot of these shows are, created by whole teams of people, big writers' rooms, rotating between seasons, lots of like producers inputting plot at like different levels. So authorship in TV is a complicated thing, unless you're like Aaron Sorkins and you get to control every aspect of your show. But I can see a thread running through. I mean, there's the later seasons of Battlestar Galactica when there's the the war against the Dominion and things like that. There's a sort of space military thread running through this, and that I think is approaching a similar kind of. I don't know, it's a long way from the war films of the 60s and 70s when it was all very inspirational and crusading. More sort of like the grim technical necessity of war is one of the main subjects of Battlestar Galactica.
Well, yeah, I think it becomes a sort of, especially at this point, coming into it season 4, it becomes an emerging thread in For All Mankind, because I think when the show starts, it's kind of, NASA are more of a sort of group of scientists and pilots. There is more of a sort of, we're just doing this for the love of exploration. And as the show goes on and as it becomes clear that, well, A, they want to beat the Soviets, and it's become more of a political thing, and B, it becomes clear there's also might be some money here, conceivably. That's when other interests get involved. And by season 4, things have become quite complicated.
Yeah. That's interesting, yeah. And probably depressingly realistic if we do go to space.
Yeah. No, I dread to think what would happen if we did decide to reignite the space race now, but I suspect we'd probably end up speedrunning the first few seasons of For All Mankind.
Yeah, well, it's back. It's just mainly between like Russia, China, and India. China recently brought back rocks from the far side of the moon to Earth from the first time. So yeah, the space race is here and now. So if anything, this show is probably quite prescient.
Excellent. Well, there we go. Watch For All Mankind and prepare yourself for the future. And speaking of the future, as in the next few minutes of this podcast, Alistair, what else have you watched?
Well, it's probably another grim warning about the future, but this time AI and robots rather than space race and human conflict. I watched the film Megan, also M3 Gan.
So that's absolutely how everyone says it.
Yeah, or just like Megan, yeah. Which is a sci-fi horror film about a robot doll. The plot is there's a woman called Gemma, and she becomes the guardian of her niece after her sister and her sister's husband die in a car crash. Gemma's played by Alison Williams, who's very good in Get Out. And she is not really cut out to be a parent, but she does work for a toy company that makes robot toys for kids. So she builds a robot toy companion for her niece called Megan. And things go very well before they go very badly in classic horror film style. A lot's made of how the robot was built properly without proper grandfather controls, admin access, or like limitations put on the AI. So yeah, when she tells Megan to protect the child's emotional and physical well-being, it goes to extremes. So yeah, and it's one of those kind of escalating, creepy and dark horror movies. What I liked about it is it's not afraid to get quite silly towards the end. It does quite a good bit in kind of the doll's a bit creepy and it gets creepier and creepier. And then eventually it just becomes a Hammer horror villain and is sort of like needlessly evil. It's a good film. Yeah. This caused a bit of buzz. It sort of came out early 2022, I want to say. Possibly. It's not a particularly high profile film. I mean,
I've heard of it, and I don't follow the horror genre, so it's achieved something.
Yeah. But it's like Alison Williamson's the most famous person in it. She's not a huge name. I think it's something that's been sold basically on the premise and the fact that people seem to like it. Yeah, it's just a good fun horror film, which is why it worked. I think people like it, and it's not one that takes itself too seriously. It's willing to have some fun as well, which is good.
Yeah, as I just said, not a huge follower of horror, but it feels like has there been a horror film that's massively broken through in the last couple of years? If there is, it's not broken through to me. So yeah, I mean, maybe there's something to be said for getting back to basics and just doing some silly fun.
Yeah, I feel we've not had a viral horror hit for a while. I mean, there's some big sort of horror films have come out and things like that, but usually they're from like established horror directors who, you know, it's going to be big news when they come out. I mean, like Nope was one of the sort of top films of 2022.
Oh yeah, so is that horror? I guess
it's just debatable, isn't it? Yeah.
It was more of a sort of unsettling drama to me, but I don't know. I don't know what Jordan Peele would say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's part of the anti-horror movement, which are films that are sort of horror and not
down
horror.
with horror. Down with horror.
Yeah. Jordan Peele's become what he's become because Get Out was a sort of viral breakout hit. You know, yeah, he had some fame before that, but yeah, that was something that really catapulted him to kind of the big leagues. But yeah, obviously his new films, he's got one coming out in I think 2026. You know, that's going to be a big event, but in terms of something that's kind of come, I don't know, sort of out of nowhere, this is the last one I can really think of.
Yeah, I'm sure something will occur to me as soon as we finish this conversation and I'll feel like an idiot. But yeah, possibly. This is among the last big horror films I can think of, and yeah, glad it's good. Oh, wasn't there one about a little girl recently? I don't know if that's a sort of post-Megan film. Maybe that's what we're doing now. Childish little girl horror.
Yeah, I mean, they are kind of creepy.
Oh, it was a vampire little girl, wasn't it?
Yeah, with Gus from Breaking Bad as one of the villains.
I've forgotten the film's name. I think it was another little girl's name. So maybe that's what's happened. Maybe Megan has now set the movement.
Yeah, I mean, every October around Halloween, and usually in the summer, there's like a slate of horror films that come out. But I feel a lot of them are sort of geared to only appear to horror fans and don't try to reach out that sort of, you know, the established box of people who just like horror and go to see every horror film. And a lot of them are just sequels to like long-running franchises. It seems to be that someone hits on something like that's genuinely scary, and then they make about the 8 different versions of it. We've had lots of The Nun, Paranormal Activity, I think Saw 10 came out recently. This is at least a chance to do something vaguely original, although predictably next year Megan 2.0 is going to be released.
Obviously. I do find the mythology of the Saw films vaguely fascinating. I may have said this before, as it's been the case for a while, but yeah, the way they've tried to form this sort of ludicrous fantasy-ish mythology around them, except it's not a fantasy film. So it's just had to have this string of increasingly bizarre and improbable things happen. I'm not advocating watching the Saw films, I haven't, and feel free not to, but just reading the Wikipedia entries is a good time.
Yeah, and it's just mind-bending chronology to make all the twists and stuff fit together. Like 3 and 4 take place at the same time, and kind of their endings merge into one or something like that. And then there's like all sorts of one set before and things. I don't know, like yeah.
Yeah, they're bending yourself into pretzels to try and get the lead guy played by Tobin Bell into every film somehow.
I'm glad he's got a vehicle. He's a good actor,
even though he's been, spoilers, dead for about 8 films at this point.
Yeah, but then they always find some way to bring him back. It's horror logic.
Horror logic, but crucially without the fantasy element, which is what makes it fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the plot.
Finding a way that I have not and will not watch.
The plot's about as convoluted as dark, but doesn't have time travel in it. Which at least gives you a nice get out of a corner box when you can just go back in time.
Is that a good point to segue into Doctor Who?
I mean, that is really Doctor Who in a nutshell, isn't it?
Some of it is quite horror-y, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, some of it is scary. But yeah, if you're on the fence about Megan, I'd watch it. It's a good horror movie. I don't know if it's like pants-shittingly scary, partly because it can be quite silly. But I found it definitely very entertaining, with a sort of sideways thing to say about AI, such as let's not take all the brakes off a sentient learning machine, because that could end badly, especially as it might not see people the way we see people, and giving it supreme priority, such as protect this child at all costs, backfires, similar to that whole thing of people saying that, like, if the world's destroyed by AI, it may be because we make an AI to optimize paperclip productions, and it ends up annexing large aspects of the world's mineral resources to ensure the production of paperclips. So yeah, it's that kind of thing, but that's very much beneath the surface and what is quite a good, scary sci-fi horror thing, so fill your boots.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, cool. Now let's do Doctor Who. Doctor Who Series 1, or possibly Series 14, depending on how you count it, or the other number with the classic series added on, which I don't have to hand. But yes, this is the new series with Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, Millie Gibson as companion Ruby Sunday, and Russell T Davies back as showrunner. Following on from the Christmas special, the Doctor and Ruby are back, running through a series of adventures, investigating the mystery of Ruby's parentage, and odd and now strange magical godlike beings following the Doctor around. What's that about? So yep, we'll be talking about all 8 episodes of this. By the time this podcast comes out, it will have been about a week and a half since the series finale, so we're probably going to be pretty liberal with the spoilers, especially like basic stuff like who the main villain is. On the assumption that if you are a hardcore Doctor Who fan, it is streamed more or less globally on Disney+, you've probably seen it. So apologies if this locks you out of the review, feel free to come back later. And on that note, Alistair, what did you think of this?
Well, I think it's really good that the sense of momentum has come back into the show. Yeah, more people are talking about it. I get the impression that more people are watching it than some of the recent seasons, although I don't actually have viewing figures. And we don't know how many people are tuning in Disney+, but surely that's taking Doctor Who to a bigger audience. Yeah, overall, probably better seasons of Doctor Who, but there's certainly been worse ones. There's probably been better ones done by Ross T Davies, also certainly worse ones. It is a big improvement on the Chibnall era, which we're on the record of being a bit down on, unfortunately. And I think, yeah, the crucial appeal of this season is, Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor was great. He's been really good, great anchoring for the show. Love the chemistry between the Doctor and Ruby. 2 good, strong leads. In some ways, the show felt it kind of was back in the mode it's most comfortable in. 2 main characters, the Doctor and companion, having good, fun adventures in space and time with some twists at the end. So overall, yep, I enjoyed this.
As Alistair said, I enjoyed this as well. I think just crucially, the tone just feels like a big step up, just the feeling of momentum, just the fact that it's tackling anything interesting and making me feel emotions is a big improvement. But, I probably shouldn't spend too long just criticising the Chibnall era by implication. Even looking beyond that, trying not to just say, well, it's better, so it's great. I do think this was a decent year, but not a flawless one, especially because I felt the finale slightly farted off anticlimactically. It's not the first Russell T Davies series to do that, and we can still appreciate the good stuff in them, but yeah, I didn't feel they completely nailed the ends to the main storyline. But yeah, Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson were fantastic, a lot of energy, lots of excitement. I enjoyed this a lot overall. I think every episode had a few good things in it. Some of them were actually pretty fantastic. There's a few episodes here which are going on the classics list, which is a good start for any Doctor Who series. I have individual criticisms and we'll get to them, but as an overall show, as an experience, I enjoyed this a lot and I look forward to watching it every week.
Yeah, and that's very much part of the fact that I feel the momentum is back behind the show. Following from the 60th, bringing back Russell T Davies. I mean, he does the sort of like big emotion quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I've said before about Davis, I think his sci-fi is very emotion-forward sci-fi in that he very much starts from, I want to get to this character emotion, and then backfills the sci-fi to inform it, sometimes in ways that just involve him going, and then this happens because I want them to feel sad.
Yeah, or there's a sort of power of belief moment or something like that, yeah. But I think as long as he sells the emotion of the character, you're kind of there and sort of invested in it. And I definitely was there for the big character moments, which again links back to how the strength of this season is Ncuti and Millie.
Yeah, I think, if anything, the problem I had with the finale was I did feel like my investment in the character moments and the plots kind of split off from each other. Like there's like 2 or 3 epilogue scenes at the end of the finale, which I thought were really, really good. The very, very last one, or one of the last ones with the Doctor and Ruby and the TARDIS. I don't know why I'm dancing around spoilers. The one where they're sort of saying goodbye to each other. That was a great scene. And the couple of scenes before that with Ruby's family were also great scenes. Unfortunately, I thought that the few scenes before that, wrapping up the actual plot with the big baddie, Sutekh, the God of Death, I don't know. I felt like that plot kind of just meandered off. I felt like that felt very, whatever, we're done with that.
Yeah, with the finale, one of the issues was, like, I mean, we're just going to go full spoilers at this point, as you've been given your warning.
I did warn you.
Yeah. But like very early in the final episode, Sutekh kills pretty much all the main characters apart from the Doctor and Millie, and then kills everyone in the world. And almost straight away, I was like, well, this is going to be undone through timey-wimey stuff, which kind of took the tension out of it. It was very much Avengers, Infinity War kind of climax. But at least that left some people alive to die in the next film.
Yeah, he's doing what we like to call the double Thanos.
The double Thanos. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think my broad criticism of this sort of thing, my broad point about the whole series, I guess, which applies to this as well, is that the one thing I think Davis hasn't quite nailed is the subtle art of writing these sort of godlike magical beings. Like, there's a way of making their actions and the way characters interact with them feel weighty and not like just hand-waved nothing. A kind of symbolic magical thinking, a sort of metaphor. And I don't feel like he's quite mastered it, like, to be honest. If I had to isolate my criticisms of some of these episodes down to the same thing, it's that the handful of episodes that tackle the symbolic magical creatures, which is like The Devil's Chord, the music one, 73 Yards, the one with the sort of Welsh folk horror, and the two-part finale. Those are the three where I feel like the ending just kind of happened. Davis to sort of use the magic to go, it's over now. There you go. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean all those episodes are awful. I actually think Devil's Chord and 73 Yards, apart from the slightly rushed ending, I really enjoyed. But I do think it's something he hasn't quite mastered yet, and if he's going to continue with this theme into the second series, hopefully he'll get a handle on it.
Yeah, he's aiming at the sort of Lovecraft vibe of, like, humans are this tiny, insignificant island of sanity in this vast, indifferent, and sometimes just like kind of like appallingly terrifying cosmos.
I'd have gone for Neil Gaiman as a comparison, just because I don't think Davis is quite that nihilistic, but yeah.
No, I mean, it's something, to be fair, I think classic Doctor Who could do quite well, partly because didn't have special effects budget to make things look like realistic or make things look epic and powerful. They actually could, you know, if you just got an actor, you've got a kind of, you know, they did a quite good job of making the Time Lords seem kind of standing on the top of Mount Olympus, just looking down at the bugs and not really caring about them, is something they managed to actually get through because the writing had to deliver what effects and things couldn't. And yeah, Davis is good at writing an emotional yarn, such as like 73 Yards. I was very into that story, yeah, including the bit when whatever it is, the weird Welsh folk horror monster thing drives Ruby's mum away, drives everyone who tries to talk to her, you know, including Unit, totally isolates her through some mysterious power. And I was like, yeah, that's really good writing. You really see the effect that has on the character set over a long period of time, like 20 years. There was like some good writing. But then, yeah, it just has a sort of ending, which is just kind of, and then it ended without feeling a need to explain all this weird stuff we set up because there isn't really a satisfactory answer. Bit of a cop-out.
It's frustrating because the answer you want isn't necessarily a fucking sci-fi thesis on how this all makes sense. Things are allowed to be mysterious and folk horror-y, and that's obviously the tone he was going for. But I just didn't think he quite nailed the way to do that. It didn't quite feel like it symbolically arcs around. What you sort of wanted was to be told that Ruby herself somehow ended up, I don't know, standing sentinel for years as the 73 Yards monster or something in a way that feels emotional and venting, and instead it just sort of happened. Yeah, it's annoying because you can see what he's going for, and some of the time he's very close to getting it, but I didn't think he quite did.
I think Doctor Who needs some level of explanation. It doesn't work when it's David Lynch style, very, very confusing, and there's no... And although there may be an answer behind all of this somewhere in David Lynch's head, you'll never get to it. You just have to like kind of be the bystander to the kind of the passing of these great cosmic tides. Not many people can do that, and I don't think that's really what Doctor Who is good at. Doctor Who needs some kind of explanation. I mean, occasionally... And Rick Davis is good at this, occasionally meeting the genuinely inexplicable thing, and it's quite scary when the Doctor says, I have no idea what this is. But that has to be done really sparingly. It's been done about 3 or 4 times in the last 14 years, and I feel if it becomes more frequent, then it's just going to become, well, we're just showing the Doctor's ignorance. Whereas, it's something that has to be used sparingly. So, yeah, I feel you can't really sort of like slide around explaining something like the 73 Yards thing. The musical one was a bit better because at least I believe in that. It's quite Neil Gaiman. We all believe in music and we've invested it with power. So there is some kind of cosmic being behind this, influencing and controlling music that could consume the whole world through music. I mean, that's the sort of broad emotional strokes Rusty T Davies thing that sort of works.
Yeah, I didn't think the music one suffered from a lack of explanation of what was going on. I thought the music one suffered from the fact that the ending was just, to be honest, it was I think what we described before as the sort of constipated X-Men moment where all the characters just waved their hands at each other until the plot ended.
Yeah, that was the thing.
That was my problem with that episode, which again is, I think, a lack of fully making the magic work.
I did like that episode was the historic figures that they visit, because there was one historical figure at least must be visited in a season. It's the Beatles this time, which is cool. Slightly terrifying that Doctor Who is now travelling back to a time when Doctor Who was actually on TV in order to visit history. I'm sure my dad will find that only a reinforcement of how old he's getting. But that was good, and I thought they did a good Beatles. The actors they've got, they nailed the accents, they nailed the look.
Didn't they visit like the 70s or something in series 2? Oh, who knows? Anyway.
I think they did. Well, they also did the episode about Rose's dad, which is the 80s in series 1. But I mean, that can't be escaped because I feel that's not going to history, capital H history. I don't know, maybe splitting heirs, like meeting, say, Isaac Newton or Queen Elizabeth or Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But the Beatles are becoming capital A history. It's interesting they brought back Sutek, who is only in one season, well, one adventure of classic Doctor Who. So I think technically now Sutek's been in more new Who than old Who. It's one of those things, and they've got to the point now when they are really like digging up the classic villains, the ones that only appeared once. Although there is a handful that have appeared 2 or 3 times that they've not done. It is a classic adventure, Pyramids on Mars, and it is actually a really, really good one, and it's well known. So it was nice to see that villain return. Yeah, largely reinvented.
Yeah, I think Davis, not unwisely, has concluded that he needs to start maybe digging into things outside of the Master Dalek Cybermen axis for his big villains. You know, he's done a big episode with the Toymaker. He's now done a big series arc ending in Sutek. There needs to be something other than just it's the Daleks again or it's the Master again, because that's the one thing that the show hasn't quite managed to move away from.
Yeah, it's good he did a whole season with no Daleks, Cybermen or Master, or at least not as a primary villain, which is good. You know, yeah, breathe some more life into them. We've had so many Dalek, Cybermen and Master ones, especially Dalek and Master season finales. And I think he's walking a good line of basically making stuff accessible, not relying too heavily on the really, really well-known villains. Yeah, Dalek, Cybermen, Master. But also using his own knowledge as a lifelong fan of the show, reaching back into the canon to pull out the stuff that is, by the hardcore fans or the very old fans, delete as appropriate, really well remembered and really prized. Like the Toymaker, Pyramids of Mars, these are undisputed classics amongst Doctor Who, so she's choosing the right stuff from its history.
Yeah, and I think Sutek works for this because, you know, even if you don't know who Sutek is, you know, it's not that hard for a writer of Davis's caliber to sell the God of Death as scary.
Yeah.
Which he does successfully. Like, I think the second episode from last, the penultimate episode, which is basically the unravelling the arc plot episode, I found sort of entertaining as I watched it, although I do feel like they could have dramatised it more. I'm not entirely sure having them just hanging around unit unravelling the arc plot in the same way that you do on, like, Reddit was perhaps the most thrilling way of experiencing that story. Surely it could have been more of an adventure, but I don't know. Maybe the money ran out.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I don't know, they wanted to bring the characters together, which is always a Russ T Davies thing. Final episode must bring all these different characters together. I mean, it did dive into the other big mystery of the season, which is what's the deal with Ruby. And I did like that the final twist was, well, it's the identity of her mother. And the final twist is that her mother was just a normal person who got pregnant as a teenager and had to give the kid up. It wasn't revealed that, yeah, she's another cosmic being somehow entwined with the Doctor, aka Kara, things like that. Ruby is just, yeah, an ordinary person who's wandered into the orbit of the Doctor, which I kind of like the mundanity of that twist, and it kind of goes back to some of the things Russell T Davies is good at, such as, you know, ordinary people are great and can save the world. You don't need to be, you know, like what they said about Rose. You don't need to be, you know, a great cosmic being to save the world. You just need to be a decent, ordinary person.
Yeah, I felt like he slightly made the twist a bit woolly by having weird things like it randomly snowing around Ruby happen, because that meant he had to kind of flim-flam the explanation for that when it turned out she was just a normal person.
I guess it was more power of belief or something like that.
Yeah, I have no problem with her being an ordinary person. I actually half listened to the video commentary for this episode, which is on iPlayer, and one of the things Davis said about that twist, or that revelation, was he did this because he quite liked the similar reveal about Rey in Star Wars The Last Jedi, and was annoyed when it was then undone in the following film to appease angry fanboys. So he decided he was going to go all in on it in this series. And fair enough, it's a good twist, it's a good move. As I say, I felt like he made it slightly woolly by having magical things happen around her, but just for non-magic reasons, which is strange. But as a twist, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, Russ T Davies is 100% right about all of that. It was quite nice, and obviously he nailed the crucial bit, which is it is really emotional when, yeah, right at the end, Ruby finally meets her mum. I did have a tear in my eye. I was thinking, Russell, you've done it again. You got me crying at Doctor Who.
Yeah, no, as I say, the last few scenes in the finale did pull it back, and yeah, did do a lot to erase any mild disappointment I felt. And to be fair, there's some good scenes at the beginning as well. There's a few scenes where the Doctor discovers that he's effectively been killing worlds by landing on them with a TARDIS, and that was a good emotional scene. Ncuti Gatwa could definitely do that stuff. Even though, as you said, for various reasons, at that point, the stakes of the plot have maybe started to seem a bit loose. You know, you can still believe in the Doctor's sadness at that point, and it's really sold.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And yeah, really showed off how good Ncuti Gatwa is as an actor. So he did some good emotional scenes then. Yeah, he's got a sort of Tennant like energy to him, but he's got a bit more of the dark streak than Tennant had. So
Really?
yeah, that's what I feel, that like he has moments of like generally can do sort of, I don't know, a bit more intense. Maybe not as much as Peter Capaldi or even Matt Smith, but I feel he's kind of got, I don't know, the balance of the sort of the Willy Wonka-iness of the Doctor about right.
I don't know. It did some pretty dark Doctor moments with Tennant, especially towards the sort of second half of his time on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not no shade of Tennant, no shade of Tennant. He's good. He's good as well. Yeah.
I'm not criticising anyone's acting. I just think that was something that was quite heavily played up with Tennant.
Yeah, but I feel that they're definitely riffing on possibly the most famous modern incarnation of the Doctor to achieve worldwide success with Nshute's performance. But I think he nails it. Yeah, he brings what I want from the Doctor, which is that exuberance, that energy, the confidence, the kind of the caring, but also he's bringing something his own to it as well. You know.
Yeah, I've seen Gatwa described as the sort of post-therapy Doctor, the sort of Doctor who's really sort of emotive and in touch with his feelings. And there's something in that, I think. That, I think, is the big difference. That was obviously sort of played up when they did the handover and the bi-generation. Where Tennant was going off to, finally take some time off and relax and process his emotions. And if anything, Gatwa was almost the Doctor who had gone through that already and was now a lot more chill and a lot more in touch with himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel there's bits when like the Doctor has to be like loving or supportive, and he's very good at those bits, kind of affirming people, and he usually lowers his voice a bit, and it does that sort of warmth very well.
Yeah, no, he was really good. I was slightly disappointed that I know it was because he was finishing filming Sex Education, but it was slightly disappointing that he wasn't in 2 of the 8 episodes, even though the 2 episodes he wasn't in much were both pretty good, or really good even. I felt ashamed that a quarter of the season didn't have him in. I felt like as a result, although I still felt the emotions due to the good writing, I would have quite liked to spend a bit more time with the Doctor and Ruby actually together.
Yeah, especially as they're switching out the companion for the next season.
Yeah, I gather Ruby will still be present in some form, although Davis is being coy about exactly how. But yes, we're doing the switch already. So yeah, I felt like it was... I know 8-episode series is the way TV is going now, but I felt like it was a shame we didn't get slightly longer with the Doctor and Ruby to feel it more.
I would have preferred longer season, definitely. Something closer to the 13 seasons that they did, with Eccleston, Tennant, Smith.
Yeah, I would have preferred a longer series, or if not, I would have preferred that they maybe didn't have quite as many Doctor Light episodes in this quite short series.
Yeah, it works when there's 13 episodes to do one without the Doctor. You get some great stuff like Blink coming out of there, but, we're here to see the Doctor. And I also like the fact that the other ones had, like, other two-parters, so they could do a longer story, but not save it for the finale. Some of the great mid-season two-parters, from, like, The Rebel Flesh, The Impossible Planet, the Library, some great ones that aren't season finales. But, no, if this is a success, as it appears to have been, then who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, they've already filmed the second series, which is one reason why a lot of things aren't resolved. I think this is very much being treated as a 2-year arc. To be honest, maybe we should basically treat this as a 16, 17, 18 episode series. I don't know. We'll see how it feels when we watch the rest of it.
Which is closer to the arcs they did in the past, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of good stuff. As I say, the other Doctor Light episode, well, sort of Doctor Light episode, was Dot and Bubble, the sort of social media one, which, again, I thought was really good. It was Russell T Davies in his other mode from sort of run around, slightly camp panto fun, which is actually quite dark and angry. Like, if you've watched things he's done like years and years, although Russell T Davies is well known for his fun, he's also got a deep sense of anger and injustice, and that definitely came through a bit more here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one when it was like Doctor Who does Black Mirror a bit. Maybe not quite as cynical as Black Mirror, but it was definitely, on the sort of darker and cynical side. I like the sort of things like their kind of perfect social media tailored world is all white, which actually someone had to point out to me, or at least on Twitter, before I noticed. It's a sort of, this kind of racially pure society, which is quite dark and disturbing. That was a good episode.
Well, yeah, and the ending itself, the final moments where they refuse to accept help from the Doctor because he's black and then go off to die. That was, even by Black Mirror standards, quite grim. Well done, Russell.
Yeah, or they're going to revisit it and they've founded some kind of like insane cargo cult society that's just more violent and crazy. I feel he's left that open that he could come back to them to really show how they only get worse when they go off to live in the wilderness together. A bunch of social media obsessed white nationalists.
Maybe, although part of me feels that he's the short story purity of it is better served by just assuming that the answer is, and then they all died.
Yeah.
Well. Also, to be honest, I feel like the anger that you feel in that episode is best served by, and then they went off to die. Because they just wouldn't accept the Doctor's help because of their racism. Bad luck, guys.
Yeah. No, that was a good one. Yeah, that was quite biting. Yeah, and it pitched. I feel the level of political satire, anger, points about technology and society at a level that is both accessible to Doctor Who's younger viewers, because it is ultimately a sort of show aimed at children, teens, and also isn't like kind of just like kind of really insulting to grown-ups who are also watching, insulting their intelligence. That it kind of pitched it as an accessible level of satire.
I actually thought they left it impressively light touch considering the family audience of Doctor Who. I was expecting, or sort of wondering if Gatwa was going to have a line in his final scene where he's yelling at them, like explicitly saying, please don't reject my help because of my skin colour, this is ludicrous. I know you're racist, but please let me save you. But he didn't actually say that. He left it somewhat unsaid and just in the performance and their reactions, which, considering that the show is pitched at children, was an impressive amount of crediting them with intelligence.
Yeah. Well, he's good at writing for that level, kind of communicating well to people, and respecting young people's intelligence as well. So yeah, it's a good bit of writing all round, really.
Yeah, and speaking of well-written episodes, I guess Stephen Moffat returns, as he perhaps inevitably always would, with Boom, the third episode.
Yeah. I think he's writing the Christmas special as well.
I have heard that.
Yeah, I liked Boom. I thought it was good. Back to what Moffat does well, which is like single episode that's like a really good sort of self-contained story, like less sort of neat, complicated stuff. Yeah, very simple. The Doctor treads on a landmine. They have to resolve it. Someone also, very cleverly pointed out it arcs back to the World War II one in the Christopher Eccleston era. It's the same arms company, which is mentioned then, and he says their factory is no longer there. There's a banana grove now. I like bananas. So it kind of closes the loop on that.
Yeah, I think there's also the army that are in it, the sort of clergy army, are also something that's a callback to his big Matt Smith arc, I think.
Yeah. So he's picking up those threads.
Which is fine, let the man have his Easter eggs. He's written like 50 episodes. But yeah, I thought that was a good one. I thought, again, an impressive amount of anger from Stephen Moffat, a man who I don't necessarily associate with that level of anger. Yeah, it felt very pointed, that episode.
Yeah. No, I thought it was a good one. Again, good piece of satire on the military-industrial complex, sort of Orwell-esque point, which is that war exists to consume capital rather than share it equally, and is ultimately pointless.
Yeah, I don't know if that was Russell T Davies getting in Moffat's ear and saying, yes, Stephen, be explicitly angry. But yeah, either way, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're friends, and they've written together for Doctor Who in the past, so I'm sure there's a collaborative experience behind this. Partly to make the tone of the season work, so that they all go together and form like a complete, tonally consistent story.
Yeah, no, it was good work from Moffat. I thought that the ending was maybe a little bit garbled, as some of his stuff sometimes is, but as I was saying earlier about Davis, I think he pulls off the feelings well enough that it still works.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed that one. I like the Bridgerton episode as well. That was quite fun. Good bit of period drama, some good emotions as well. Then that was good.
Yeah, and considering it's a Davis season, there weren't actually that many episodes which were just a good fun runaround, but that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, it was something he does very, very well.
Yeah, no, I don't think he actually wrote that one, did he? It was two of the writers from Loki.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good episode. I enjoyed it. It feels like it's something that, again, might be revisited when we get to the second half of this 2-season run.
Yeah, he's introducing some new characters that can be in the background, or reoccurring characters, rather than characters in every episode, characters that can pop up once a season, which is sort of standard for most shows. You have your once-a-season characters, which they're introducing new ones, which is good because, they're trying to reach a new audience. They're on Disney+. They want to bring in new people. They don't want too many nods to the sort of 60 years of existing chronology.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen Davis say he'd like to do more spin-offs, and obviously they've now got their Whoniverse idents that they play at the front. So I don't know whether any of this is meant to be obvious spin-off fodder. I guess the obvious thing might be the Jonathan Groff rogue character, but yeah, I don't know.
We'll see how he goes. I mean, Captain Jack got his own show, so
I'm hoping they don't do a unit show. Nothing personal, unit, but I just don't find them compelling enough to watch a whole show.
It would be a bit like Torchwood, really. Just some people stuck on Earth dealing with aliens that crash landed there. Unit's good for when you need to broaden out Doctor Who's story to make it kind of bigger and have soldiers and battles and political crises, but it's not really enough for a whole show, is it?
No, at least not enough without it feeling slightly generic. But anyway, yeah, these are all hypothetical things you might do. The show they've actually made, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I'm excited for the Christmas special, and I'm excited for more next year. So yeah, roll on Ncuti Gatwa, roll on Rusty Davis, roll on Doctor Who.
Yeah, no, as we said up front, it's very cool to be excited about this show again. I don't think it was a perfect year. I think I've done my nitpicks at this point. But yeah, I think it has momentum and feeling and excitement again, and that alone is good enough for me. I'm excited for more. Okay. And last up today, we will be finally talking about Godzilla Minus One, the acclaimed epic kaiju action film released last year in Japan and America, and then finally released here on Netflix in the last month or so. So we have finally seen this. This was written and directed by Takashi Yamazaki, and this is about a former kamikaze pilot who decides he can't go through with it, who then has a harrowing encounter with the gigantic lizard monster Godzilla, and then attempts to return to regular society, only to find himself haunted by both people who accuse him of cowardice and of shirking his duty, and by, yes, the massive lizard monster. We have seen this very popular and well-received movie. Alistair, what did you think of it?
Well, it was good, fun, tense monster film. Good watch. I can see why people like this film because, yeah, it's an entertaining action film that's got a good emotional core to it. I like that there was really no sense of irony or like sort of humor to it really at all. Like there was no postmodernism at all to it. Like it was very much like doing Godzilla straight up. It's a giant monster. It's coming to wreck Tokyo. People are running, people are screaming. Everyone's scared. That works really well. And yeah, setting this one in the immediate aftermath of World War II, I think really worked because it really allows them to dive into the trauma faced by Japan during the war. And yeah, obviously have Godzilla as a metaphor for the destruction that was foisted upon Japan during the war. So on all those levels, this worked well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, the discourse around this film left me half expecting some kind of kaiju-themed art film, but I was happy to see this was actually just a good movie. It's, as you say, maybe the general tone of action movies has become so laced with irony and sarcasm and commentary that just making a relatively straight action movie where they take the terrifying nature of Godzilla seriously means you're into like fully dramatic art film territory. But no, this was good. It's had enough emotional weight to feel serious. It's obviously tackling the metaphor of Godzilla as atomic weaponry very straight on. But yeah, I enjoyed the sort of human journey of this kamikaze pilot, which is obviously a very genuine, real and sad thing, and the way his journey matched up with his battle against Godzilla, even though it did also feature several awesome sequences of the monster trashing cities and them finally taking him on at the end, just like you'd hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want from the Godzilla film. I think they've studied the previous films in the franchise enough to know what, works well and things like that. And an interesting arc for the main character. I guess we're going to drop spoilers here, as you've probably seen the film if you want to see it, or if you haven't seen it and want to, go see it because it's good. Yeah, here comes some spoilers. His interesting arc plot as the main character, a kamikaze pilot who decides he doesn't want to die, is accused of cowardice, and his arc plot is finding the courage to go through with it in the end. So at the end his mission is to kamikaze his plane right down Godzilla's throat and then explode it, which is an interesting arc plot. Yeah, it doesn't quite go exactly as you'd expect or as that implies, but I thought that's a bold choice of a story for the main character.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I say, I did remark that this is very much still a good action monster film, but yes, the fact that it's sort of ruminating a bit on suicide and finding the courage to want to go on living does elevate it a bit or make it a bit more thoughtful and adult than any other film where it's just about smashing that big goddamn monster.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, there's some harrowing emotional business throughout, some of which is slightly reversed at the conclusion, which part of me thought was a bit of a cop-out, but also I quite liked the character by then, and I was quite happy to see him get a win.
Yeah, and I kind of felt emotionally invested in the ending. I know, similar to what I was saying about Russell T Davies. It did a big emotional moment at the end, which I felt paid off, even though it possibly walked back some of the jeopardy by restoring to life characters you thought were dead. But I was emotionally with the character, so I was willing to let it go.
I mean, my genre comics brain did think of that death. Where is the body? So yeah, I wasn't completely surprised by that one.
Yeah, I thought the same as well. It's the classic thing that like the character needs to redeem themselves emotionally, spiritually, and then they get their loved one returned to them. You could argue that there's, she was brought back by magic by him facing his personal demons, is one way of interpreting it. Because, in the universe where he chickens out a second time, she's not still alive. But that's just the logic of film, and it works if you're emotionally with the character.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think part of this is maybe a cultural difference, but the idea of this sort of character's fulfilling journey being finding the courage to go through with plane-based suicide is It's complicated and it's emotional, and it is very seriously played here, as it probably should be.
Yeah, it was one of the good things about the film. It's just done straight up, as if, yeah, what if Godzilla had appeared in, in the late 1940s, early 1950s. Yeah, and they really do lean into, Godzilla as a metaphor for how devastated Japan was after the war. I mean, all the main characters had their families are killed by the war. There's a sort of found family group of main characters who come together because they're the last surviving members of all their family, many of whom were killed in the firebombing campaign of Japan was done before the nuclear weapons by the American military. And there really are lots of shots at the beginning of the film before Godzilla shows up of just how devastated Japan is, how everyone's living in the burned out sort of wreckage of their homes, how ruined everything is. Most of the characters have some kind of PTSD, they've all experienced a lot of violence, are quite, harrowed by this. Everyone's lost someone, there's destroyed cities, there's obviously nuclear bombs come into it. Not only is the aftermath of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but Godzilla gets bigger and stronger at one point because it's exposed to the Bikini Bay Operation Crossroad bomb as well, the one that was done in the late 1940s. So, yeah, they're really leaning into that whole nuclear war, devastation of Japan, the trauma that Japan went through, and by setting it directly after the war, that really enforces that point.
Yeah, whilst also still giving us our Godzilla battle sequences where he just looks awesome. It's like, oh no, he's doing his energy blast.
Yeah.
But, yep, that's both what I want from Godzilla and also fits in with the sad feeling metaphor. Good job.
Yeah.
Also, the monster effects are great. That big lizard looks amazing.
Yeah, and doesn't look too CGI. I don't know if there was someone some bits were like using motion capture or someone in a suit. I went to look into this before we recorded, but I didn't have time. But I felt that, the monster looked really, really good and, bizarrely believable.
Yeah, in a weird way, it didn't look computer generated and it didn't look too overly rendered, but it just looked terrifying and real in a strange, sort of simple way. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain retroness to it, I think, which is something I don't personally have nostalgia for because I think this is the first Godzilla film I've ever watched, so I have no point of comparison whatsoever. But either way, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it's made to stand alone, and I feel that's one of the reasons why it's been so successful is that it's very much a standalone film. You can just watch it in its own right. You don't need to know much about Godzilla other than the obvious, which is a giant monster, crushes cities. I did spend some time online reading the convoluted history of the franchise and how the rights are now entwined between American and Japanese studios, both with their own Godzilla franchises.
Yeah, the American one has a bunch of films going at the moment where Godzilla teams up with King Kong or something, don't they?
Yeah, and before that there was one when they had like Godzilla and Mothra and some other kaijus and things like that. And they'd remade it in 2014 as well. They keep remaking Godzilla. And there's also been a whole series of new Japanese films, including a live action one before this and a series of animated ones as well. So yeah, it looks like all cultures are engaging in that franchise nostalgia thing, and Godzilla's no exception to it. But this film being both good and entirely standalone, I think, is what's allowed it to rise to the top.
Yeah, no, this is definitely the first Godzilla film in a while that has actually got buzz, and I've found myself wanting to watch it because so many people I respect are talking about how good it is. I mean, sort of coming back to something you said earlier, I think one of the things it does very well is, as you say, there's a very strong, clear arc for the main character, but there's also a lot of other characters, this sort of found family around him. And a lot of them actually have quite good sort of coherent story arcs in themselves. Like, there are characters who only appear for like 5 or 6 scenes, but those scenes do form a solid sort of story arc, which is the sort of thing you do in a sort of good, well-constructed, like, action movie. You have these supporting characters who also find sort of their own little moments of resolution.
Yeah, like there's the younger guy who's too young to go to war, and they don't want him to risk his life in the battle against Godzilla, who has a moment when he turns up with a sort of flotilla of civilian vessels to drag Godzilla away at a crucial moment, sort of Dunkirk kind of style. But that's, a nice moment, yeah.
Well, yeah, and the guy he meets on the island at the beginning, who yells at him a lot, ends up having a sort of resolution make-up moment with him as well. It's good.
Yeah, the mechanic. All the characters are united by this sense that they've gone through the trauma of the war. And they always point out that they're the ones who survived. And there's a good speech by one of the military leaders at one point that we've treated, life, we as in Japan or the Japanese Empire, treated life as something that's expendable and throw away. And now they want to, rather than find things to die for, find things to live for, which is, it's a sort of stirring moment, especially as broadly Japan gets a lot of criticism for not confronting its World War II history strongly enough, not in the way that, say, Germany or Italy has, especially Germany. And I feel that's really coming through in this film. There is a desire to confront head on at least some of the terrible aspects of the war, if not the worst ones, or at least some of them.
Yeah, I think certainly the destruction and the harrowing after effects of it, as you said, the PTSD of it is definitely at the forefront here.
Yeah. Which is the period setting really, really works. Considering also all these other Godzilla franchise films we've set, though I've seen none of them, I'm going to sweepingly say they're all set present day, or at least all set when they're made. One of the Japanese ones is set in the past, but yeah, this one being a period piece, allows us to do that and makes it different.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a difference between doing a period piece and doing a nostalgia film, I guess. Like, you could make a film where you basically remake the original Godzilla set at the exact same time, just to, get money from nostalgia fans. And people would probably criticise that for being cheap and rubbish if it wasn't, like, actually about anything. But here, there's a sense that they've set it in this period for a reason, which is why it works.
And I feel also Godzilla itself, like a lot of Japanese culture, is reacting to the trauma of the war. He's created by destroys cities, created by nuclear bomb. Akira as well, starts with a huge nuclear explosion over Japan. It's responding to the trauma of the war. And I feel when you move Godzilla to present, and especially take it out of Japan, that symbolic level disappears and it just becomes a big monster crushing things. And setting this film when they've set it is an attempt to put that original meaning back into the film, and that's why this film works. And the other ones, haven't been successful.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot to say about this film, other than...
this is a very late contender for the not particularly coveted Titus Fuck Award. Yeah, it's just a very good film that has all its parts in place.
Yeah. One tiny bit of trivia. I watched the end of the credits. There isn't a Marvel-style post-credits sequence. However, the film is dedicated to Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan who was assassinated recently.
Nice.
Interesting dedication. Didn't expect that, but it's there.
There is a sort of pre-credit sequence which gives you the inevitable sort of "is Godzilla really dead" moment, but it doesn't really play as franchise mongering. It's just the sort of thing you do in these films.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, it's perhaps a difficult one to say reams and memes about, but it is really good.
Yeah, just watch it.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. UK people, go get it.
That's all we have time for this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice. Whilst you're there, please leave us a review. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself.
And you can also follow us on social media, where we are MFV Podcast on Twitter and Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook. And I think we're also now MFV Podcast on Blue Sky. So if you desperately wanted to jump ship from Twitter, then now's your chance. You can follow us and your experience is complete. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, where I am Nick Bryan, or indeed I am still Nick MB on Twitter if you don't want to leave. I am aware that increasingly people are actually referring to Twitter as X, but I'm not going to do it. You can also find me on the general internet at nickbryan.com.
You can find more from me on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky by searching for Alistair Ball, or find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, or get my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. And you can join us here next time, where we will be reviewing Space Adventure Scavenger's Reign and Disney sequel Inside Out 2. Join us in 2 weeks' time to find out what we make of those. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.